Hello and welcome back to another Saturday edition of the Fantasy Football Actuary Podcast. I am your host, Brock Talby, the Fantasy Football Actuary. Our first segment on this Saturday episode is the Thursday night throwback. So we'll just talk about the game Thursday night and what a mediocre game it was. Honestly, this division is not that fun to watch. It's just four not very good football teams currently. Um, so the Eagles won a close one over the Giants. Like I said, the whole division, the Eagles, Cowboys, Giants, and Washington, the football team, they're all just not very good right now. So any game featuring these teams is probably not going to be that enjoyable. And a game featuring two of them, not the best primetime matchup. Carson Wentz, who I mentioned as my favorite streamer of the week, he had a great fantasy day. He had a couple passing touchdowns, a rushing touchdown, and over 350 yards passing. But he was 25 for 43, and really, when you watch the game, he just doesn't look like that good of a quarterback right now. And this is what I mentioned on the Tuesday episode. I said that I loved streaming Wentz, but I don't think he's that good. I'm not sold on Wentz. I would not play him unless he was playing the Giants, which he was on Thursday. So he came through with a good game for fantasy. Daniel Jones, he was fine. He could have had a huge fantasy day if he could have completed a 90-yard touchdown run instead of tripping in the wide open field 10 yards away from the end zone. So, yeah, I saw a crazy stat that he hit the highest speed by any quarterback in a game in like the last 5 or 6 years or something like that, which is hard to believe with Lamar Jackson running around out there. But apparently, Daniel Jones is really fast. He just trips over grass sometimes. He just got going way too fast. So Fulgham was a stud again. He had 11 targets, but he only caught five of them for 73 yards. Deshaun Jackson is now on IR, so you don't have to worry about him eating into Fulgham's work at all. Travis Fulgham was already a stud, anyways, and I think that he had already taken over that wide receiver group, whether Deshaun Jackson was back or not. If Alshon Jeffrey comes back, I'm not worried about him. Travis Fulgham is the guy now. He firmly has my confidence for sure. And Deshaun Jackson, what are the Eagles doing? What's up with these teams putting premier wide receivers, guys that they need in their offense, returning punts? He got hurt on a punt return near the end of the game. That's why he's on IR with a high ankle sprain now. The same thing happened with Pittsburgh. Deontay Johnson left that last game with a back injury because he got hurt on a punt return. I don't understand teams having good wide receivers return punts. It doesn't make any sense to me. I don't get the logic, but anyways, Deshaun Jackson's out on IR yet again. Greg Ward caught a touchdown, and Boston Scott also caught a touchdown at the end of the game. He caught the game-winning one, actually, which kind of saved his night from being disappointing. He wasn't that good up until that point, which is what I said on the Tuesday episode. He was disappointing in week one when Miles Sanders was out, and everyone would rush to get him. And his opportunities this year, he hasn't looked that good so far. I know he looked really good at the end of last year, but he hasn't had that same explosiveness. But he came through with a few catches for a decent amount of yards, 40 something yards, I think, through the air, and then obviously that game winning touchdown. So salvaged his night right at the end. And then Devonta Freeman, he left the game near the end of the third quarter with an ankle injury. Um, but he only had 3 carries up to that point, which is really weird. He had like 15 to 20 carries or touches rather in the last couple of games. So he only had 3 carries. I think he had 1 target and he failed to catch it. So through 3 quarters, only getting 3 carries is very odd. Very weird game for Devonta Freeman. So anybody who played him, starting in a big hole heading into the weekend games. And Wayne Gallman, he came in to replace Freeman, so he becomes an interesting pickup next week if Freeman does miss more time. Gallman had a rushing touchdown, a goal line. He got the touchdown after Daniel Jones tripped. Um, So Wayne Gallman got like a 1 yard rushing touchdown. He had a couple catches for, I think he only had a total of like 45 or 50 yards or something, but he had the touchdown. So something to keep in mind next week if Freeman is still injured. So with the Thursday night throwback out of the way, we will get into the NFL newsstand. As always, let's start with the COVID news first. So the Raiders' entire offensive line is currently on the COVID list because one of them tested positive, and then the others were deemed high risk because of contact tracing. So I also saw Adam Schefter talking about how they are under investigation for not following NFL protocols and wearing their masks or something. I don't know. This is just this is peak 2020 right here. The NFL is investigating broken protocols for not wearing masks. I don't know. I can't imagine that the Raiders are forced to play without their entire offensive line just because of contact tracing. Um, it came out Friday morning that they haven't had any new positives since then. So they're probably going to be without that one offensive lineman, and hopefully the rest can come back. They did flex this game out of the Sunday night. So the Raiders were supposed to play the Buccaneers on Sunday Night Football. They flexed that game to the 4 o'clock slot and moved the Cardinals and Seahawks to Sunday Night Football, just in case something does happen, I assume. But the NFL is not planning on canceling this game as of now. And hopefully the Raiders do not have some second tier complete offensive line in the game. Emmanuel Sanders, he was also placed on the COVID-19 list, so the Saints will not have him in week 7. So moving past COVID, the biggest non-COVID news is that Antonio Brown has signed a 1-year deal with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. It came out on Wednesday, I think, that several teams were apparently talking to Antonio Brown. His 8-game suspension is almost up, and he is able to return in week 9, I believe. So several teams were in talks with Antonio Brown, and apparently ESPN or Matthew Berry, someone got a hold of this, tweeted this out, and so Antonio Brown was being scooped up off every single waiver wire in every single league that I'm in. I wasn't really super high on signing Antonio Brown, the free agent, and I wouldn't be too high on signing Antonio Brown, the Buccaneer. He might finish around, once he comes back, I could see him being like wide receiver 20 the rest of the year. I don't really anticipate him being super good. And the Buccaneers have so many weapons. Godwin, Evans, Ronald Jones, Gronk. So yeah, I'm not super excited about Antonio Brown being on this team. Raheem Mostert was placed on IR with a high ankle sprain. This is the same injury that has kept Christian McCaffrey out. So Mostert he might miss more than the 3-week minimum. I wouldn't be surprised if he does. He came back into the game similar to Christian McCaffrey and then got placed on IR the following week. So high ankle sprains, they seem to be running rampant throughout the NFL right now. And we've seen guys miss several weeks, more than the 3-week minimum. So expect to be without Raheem Mostert for a while at least. Aaron Jones popped up on the injury report yesterday with a calf strain. And Coach Matt LaFleur indicated that A.J. Dillon could take on a larger role if Jones misses. He's a deep, deep league flyer. I mean, I would not, any 10 team or 12 team league, I would not touch A.J. Dillon. But if you're in a deep league, he could be a decent flyer if Jones is ruled out. But Jamal Williams becomes a really good play in any type of league if Aaron Jones misses. So hopefully you're able to pick up Jamal Williams, especially if you're the Aaron Jones owner, and you'll have a contingency plan in place if Jones does miss. The Eagles were apparently letting other teams know that Zach Ertz was available for trade before he went on IR. So I think this is just news because of Dallas Goedert. I think this just signifies that the Eagles are super confident in Goedert. And when he comes back from IR, hopefully by week 10, he's targeting a week 10 return. When Goddard does come back, I think he's going to be a very good play. And I think he is the Eagles' tight end of the future. I really think Zach Ertz is done, at least with the Eagles. So this news just kind of solidified that in my mind. So we'll get into the injury updates next. We'll start with the two biggest ones outside of the Aaron Jones being a game time decision. Joe Mixon is out for week 7, so he was ruled out yesterday. Hopefully, you were able to snag Giovanni Bernard from your waivers if he was available. I think with the good matchup that the Cincinnati has against the Browns, I think Gio could be a top 20 play this week with Joe Mixon out. So easy. If you're in a desperate running back situation, this was a gift. If you were able to pick up Giovanni Bernard, here's a running back play for you. Doesn't happen that often where you just have a really good, clear-cut top guy from the waiver wire that you can plug in your lineup for this week and play. And then the other big one is Michael Thomas was also ruled out for this week with a hamstring injury. So he finally got back from that high ankle sprain, and he hurt his hamstring at practice this week. So the Saints without Michael Thomas, without Emmanuel Sanders because he's on COVID. So anybody who spent a first-round pick on Michael Thomas is getting more and more angry as the season goes on. Austin Hooper, he had to have a surprise appendectomy this week. He had appendicitis, so he got his appendix taken out. He's likely to miss both this week and next week. I know that surgery can knock you out for a couple weeks, so that's unfortunate for Austin Hooper. That's just a random chance kind of thing. So I thought Austin Hooper was actually coming on strong. I highlighted him on my Tuesday show as a good tight end pickup. His target share had been going up. So hopefully when he comes back, that trend can continue and he can become more of a focal point for Baker, but he's not in this week or probably next week. Diontae Johnson is supposedly full go this week. So if you have the balls to play Diontae Johnson, good luck to you, but he is comfortably on my bench until he plays a full game. So I've talked about rage dropping Diontae Johnson based on what's available on the waiver wire and my history with wide receivers this year so far. I decided that I need the depth, and if he actually comes back and he's on the outside with Chase Claypool or James Washington, whoever spot he takes, I think Diontae Johnson is going to be out there, and the Steelers offense looks good. So I couldn't bring myself to drop him, but I'm not playing him until I see him play a full game. Sammy Watkins is most likely out for week 7, but that apparently means nothing for Mecole Hardman. So if you're a Mecole Hardman owner, I doubt you are in redraft at this point. If you own him in Dynasty, Sammy Watkins being out doesn't really do anything for you. This only affects Sammy Watkins owners. John Brown's been ruled out for Buffalo. He was hobbling around out there on the Monday night game. It looked like he tried to come back too early. And I think this is a big blow to Josh Allen. Brown was a huge part of those first few weeks when Allen was setting the world on fire. It's not just Stephon Diggs. John Brown was having a surprisingly good start to the season. So with him being out, I think Josh Allen's ceiling takes a hit. I'm obviously not sitting Josh Allen, but I think having John Brown to complement Stephon Diggs is a big deal. DJ Chark was removed from the injury report and he's good to go for this week. Surprisingly, Jonnu Smith does not carry an injury designation this week after the ankle injury that knocked him out last week. So this was a surprise. I think a lot of people expected Jonnu to miss this week. The ankle injury didn't look that good, and obviously he couldn't come back in the game. And Anthony Fersker took over at tight end for the Titans. But Jonnu's back, so if you have Jonnu, you're probably playing him. Kareem Hunt's a full go for this week, as is Noah Fant. So people have been waiting for Noah Fant. He had those big first couple of weeks. It looked like a breakout Fant season, and he's been out since. So he's finally back this week, which I'm excited for. I acquired Noah Fant in my 12-team Superflex league. Someone dropped him. I guess they were dealing with a lot of injuries and or COVID and or buys. Not really sure, but I saw Noah Fant come on my waiver wires a couple weeks ago while he was still injured and on bye with the impromptu New England game. So I scooped him up, and I've been waiting for him, and I'm playing him this week. DeAndre Hopkins is questionable for this week, but Coach Cliff Kingsbury is hopeful to have him out there. So I think Hopkins was questionable a couple weeks ago, and he didn't practice, and it was his decision to play. So I assume Hopkins will be out there again. Justin Jackson, this is a big one. Justin Jackson is questionable for the Chargers, but he is expected to play, it sounds like. This is a big one because without Austin Eckler, he is the lead back in LA. And it's a great matchup against the Jags. So I think a lot of people at first expected Joshua Kelly to take the lead role with Eckler out, but Kelly's had some fumbling issues. He hasn't looked that great past the first couple weeks. So Justin Jackson is their starter, and he will get a lion's share of the work. And against the Jags, it's a really good matchup. He's a really good play this week. So hopefully he does end up playing. Jordan Akins did not practice yesterday and is questionable. He is a tight end on the Houston Texans. I would forgive you for forgetting that because Darren Fells has been lighting it up the last couple weeks. And that's kind of come on the heels of Jordan Akins being out. So if Akins is out again this week, didn't practice, and is listed as questionable, I have a hard time believing he's going to play if he didn't practice all week. Give me all the Darren Fells again. I think he's a great bye-week fill-in. If you have Mark Andrews, for instance, he's probably widely available on most waiver wires. So Darren Fells, after the last couple weeks, I think he has a nose for the end zone, and I think it's a high probability that he gets it again this week. Robert Tonyan, he is questionable for week 7. So apparently his name, this story came out yesterday. Apparently his name has been mispronounced for the first 6 weeks of the season. Everyone's been calling him Robert Tonyan. Apparently his last name is Tunyon, which rhymes with Funyon. This was all over Twitter yesterday. I saw people saying, podcasters take note, it is Tunyon, not Tanyan. So listeners take note. Fantasy football players take note. His name looks like Tanyan, honestly. Phonics apparently means nothing anymore. And finally, Robert Woods, Tyler Higbee, and Darrell Henderson all did not practice yesterday. They play in the Monday night game, so monitor their status ahead of tomorrow's kickoff. We'll see what happens on the final injury report today. If they're listed as questionable, it sounds like Darrell Henderson's expected to play. I don't know about Robert Woods or Tyler Higbee. But with the Monday night football game, any questionable tag is risky, leaving them in your lineup. You might want to have a contingency plan, possibly someone from the Bears or someone else from the Rams. That will wrap up the injury report, and we will get into Fringe Player Frenzy. This is our main Saturday segment. This is where I take a look at some fringe players from the quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and tight end position, and tell you why I would play them this week over other fringe players, and maybe give you the confidence if you're having a hard time choosing between them or some other fringe player options. So we will start with quarterback. My fringe player quarterback is Derek Carr. So he's not like my top streaming choice or anything, but this segment is about fringe players that I think you can start and get a good game out of. Tampa Bay made Rodgers look really bad last week, but I would argue that Aaron Rodgers kind of made himself look really bad. He had a really bad pick six, and it looked like he let that affect the entire game afterwards. He did not look the same. He didn't look like he had any confidence in himself. So, yes, Tampa Bay's defense is pretty good, but I think Rodgers did not do himself any favors. Derek Carr has been great on the season. He has 11 touchdowns to 1 interception. He has a 73% completion rate, and he has a passer rating of 115.9. And I'm seeing him ranked in like the 20s this week on a lot of different expert uh, rankings. But my models like him as a top 12 play. This is likely driven by his superb performances so far and his excellent stats that he's been putting up consistently through his first 5 games. He took it to Kansas City, so don't be surprised if he comes out and looks good in this game too. I'm super bummed that this game got pushed from the Sunday night game due to their offensive line issues. I assume the NFL just wanted to make sure that they did have a Sunday night football game in case there was a big COVID breakout for the Raiders. It doesn't sound like that's happening. They haven't had any other positive tests, so hopefully their remaining offensive linemen can come back. And if they don't, if their entire offensive line does miss and they do play, maybe don't play Derek Carr. But barring that happening, I'm starting Derek Carr over Drew Brees, Gardner Minshew, and Cam Newton this week. My fringe play at running back is DeAndre Swift. So the Lions look to have shifted their game plan coming out of the bye, and Swift got the same amount of work as Adrian Peterson last week. He's obviously their future, and he has explosive play capabilities and gets passing game work. On top of that, he plays Atlanta this week. So the matchup, the usage last week, and his performance, I think all of these combined are leading my models to put him as a top 15 play this week. So because of that, I am playing him over James Conner, David Montgomery, and David Johnson. I think DeAndre Swift is a really good RB2 play this week. If you were lucky enough to own him and hold on to him until his explosive outbreak last week, or you happen to pick him up off waivers after the Lions bye and his disappointing start to the season, I think he needs to be in your lineup this week. My fringe play at wide receiver is Brandin Cooks. Okay, I got burnt by Cooks a few weeks ago. I had some wide receiver injuries, and I put him in as my wide receiver 2 in my Superflex League lineup. And that was the week that he got 0. So I subsequently dropped him as soon as rosters unlocked angrily, and it pains me to put him here as a recommended start, but since that 0, he's been really good. He had a touchdown in each of the last 2 weeks. He has 1 touchdown. 2 games ago, he was 8 for 161 yards, and last week he was 9 for 68 yards. So he's obviously really involved, and Green Bay's defense did not look stellar last week. So the matchup doesn't look that good on paper, honestly. Green Bay's had some really good defensive games, but they didn't look that good last week, and I think that Watson is more than good enough to get Cooks and Fuller going. I am starting Cooks over Keenan Allen, Mike Evans, and Terry McLaurin this week. I have Cooks ranked around wide receiver 20. I think 19 to be exact. So Cooks, I like him this week. That means he'll probably end up getting a 0 again. My fringe play at tight end is Rob Gronkowski. So you haven't been able to trust Gronk a lot this year, but he did finally put together a good game last week. He had 5 catches for 78 yards and a touchdown. He had 8 targets last week, which may not carry over into this week, but any tight end with that kind of chance at a high target share like that is worth a play, especially if you have any bye weeks. So I have Mark Andrews on bye in my 10-team standard league. I picked up Gronk, and I am streaming him this week. I think Brady could start trusting Gronk a little bit more in the red zone now that he's caught his first touchdown in a Bucs uniform. He had a 12-yard touchdown last week, so he got that red zone target. It wasn't just some lucky fluke play. Brady was looking for him in the red zone, which is a promising sign. And like I said, 8 targets. Any tight end that gets that kind of target share is definitely viable. And my models like his matchup against the Raiders this week. So I would play Gronk over Jared Cook, TJ Hawkinson, and the aforementioned Darren Fells this week. So that will wrap up the Saturday episode. Just to recap, the Fringe Player Frenzy: quarterback, Derek Carr; running back, DeAndre Swift; wide receiver, Brandin Cooks; and tight end, Rob Gronkowski. I think all of those are solid Fringe Player plays. And if you're debating on starting them or someone else in your flex, I would likely go with these guys. If you want to check out my website, you can see the full week 7 rankings there. These are modeled rankings, they are not point projections. So when you look at the numerical score associated with each player, that is a modeled score. That is not a point projection. But those rankings are available on the website, thefantasyfootballactuary.com. If you want to check out the YouTube version of this podcast, the YouTube channel is The Fantasy Football Actuary, and you can follow me on social media. My Twitter and Instagram handles are at the FF Actuary. So that will conclude this Saturday episode. Enjoy the Sunday games and good luck with your Week 7 matchups. Until next time, keep crunching those numbers.